Hello everybody, welcome to our webinar, How to Build a Lightning Fast Front-End with GraphQL. This is Victoria speaking. I'm a partner manager at commercetools, and I have to say we are really overwhelmed by such a lot of interest in the topic GraphQL, as we are always happy about new technologies with which we can improve our services, and we see a lot of traction in the market for this topic. We get this as feedback from our partners and customers as well. And we were also co-organizers of the GraphQL conference that took place in Berlin last week. So we are really happy for having Laura, who knows very well about how we use GraphQL. Laura is a software engineer at commercetools, where she designs and builds open source libraries and applications. She started at commercetools in 2012, and in the last year, she has been designing and developing a Sunrise frontend. Besides that, Laura is engaged in a lot of other technical stuff, as talks about women in technology and other technical conferences. So just one last point from my side before I hand over to Laura. If there are any questions in between, please put them into the GoToWebinar panel and we'll get back to them after Laura's presentation. And now I'd like to hand over to Laura and GraphQL.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for the introduction. I'm Laura. I'm really excited about this webinar because I declare myself a fan of GraphQL, and I know GraphQL since the very beginning, but I didn't have a chance to really work with it until last year when I started implementing a frontend that is using only GraphQL, no REST API whatsoever. And compared to the previous projects in which I was working with the REST API, it was a big difference. I really enjoy it a lot. And yeah, there are lots of best practices that I got from it. Then I also collaborated by introducing a couple of fields to our GraphQL API in commercetools. And so, yeah, you can really say that it's a topic that I find very, very interesting. So let's start by the webinar by defining what GraphQL is so that we are all in the same page. So GraphQL, it's a graph query language for APIs. That means that when we have a client and a server, GraphQL would be the language that they use to communicate with each other. And in particular, the language that they're going to use, it's defined in the GraphQL schema. The GraphQL schema is a contract between the client and the server, and it specifies things like what kind of fields can you access and what kind of functions you can use and many things that we will see later. But it's exactly what defines what you can do with this GraphQL API of this server. So let's take an example of a simple request. In this request, the client is requesting some information from the server with a GraphQL query. The server will read this query, will check that the GraphQL schema matches, so it's a valid GraphQL query, and then it will try to figure out where can it get all this information that is required. And it might be that it's taking it from a database, it might be from a REST API, or even from another GraphQL API. Wherever it comes, what it will do is get all this information and it will build a response that it will send back to the client. Now, how does a GraphQL query look like? Well, it looks very much like JSON, except that, of course, it doesn't have values because it's a query. And it also doesn't have some unnecessary things like colons or quotes or commas. And it also, you can see it has these function-looking thingies next to some fields. And if we look at it, we can quickly understand what it does. So it does, it's trying to get the product with this key. And from it wants to know the ID and the name. And from the name, it wants it in English. So it's quite easy to understand a GraphQL query. And the answer looks like this. So you can see this is proper JSON, and it's exactly the same structure as with the query. We can turn back and you see it's exactly the same. So accessing the information that we want, it's very easy because it's the same structure as the query we just did. So now that you know what GraphQL is, let's go into see what happens when we merge it with commercetools. And to do that, we have to go back into the past till 2012, when Facebook created the GraphQL. They started using it for internal usage only. But they like it so much that in 2015, they thought they should open source it so that everybody can use it as well. And it was just 1 month after it was released that our colleague, Oleg Ilienko, he started working immediately in implementing GraphQL API for commercetools. And we started using it internally, and it worked really well. We liked it a lot. So just 1 year later, we decided to make it open to the public so that everybody can use it. And we started with just few fields, 6% coverage, to see how it went. And we continued like this as long as GraphQL was gaining more traction. In 2018, we were already at 33% coverage. But in that time, we started getting like a lot of people asking about GraphQL and people interested in using it. So we decided to go all for GraphQL. And we started investing on it. And just 1 year later, we are already at 70% coverage and increasing rapidly. So how can you use it? So back in 2015, we only had this. We only had REST API. And as any REST API, it consists of different endpoints, and each endpoint it's taking care of just one entity. So for example, the card endpoint is taking care of creating cards, updating cards, deleting cards, and fetching cards. So we decided that as we already had the HTTP API built with its authentication system and everything, we could just create one more endpoint that would be the GraphQL endpoint. And to this endpoint, you would access exactly the same as the other ones with the authentication token and everything the same. You would access with post GraphQL. And unlike the other endpoints, this one has access to every entity in commercetools, even at the same time if it wants it. So what it means is that you can use your clients. They can connect just to the REST API. They can connect only to the GraphQL API, or they can even connect to both because it's using the same HTTP API in front of it. Now, why do we like so much GraphQL? So as API developers, one of our main objectives is that we want to really cover all your use cases. We want you to have to worry less and less about all the e-commerce logic and just focus on your applications. And for that, we have to bring everything that we can that you need. But at the same time, we also want your applications to be as fast as they can. And for that, we have to make sure that we provide you with only the data that you need. The problem is that with RESTful approach, that becomes a little bit difficult. Because the more use cases we try to cover for you, usually that means that we have to add more fields, which of course is taking us farther away from the objective of sending you only the data that you need. And we can see it in this example. We are trying to fetch via REST API 20 products. And from these products, we only need the name. It's the only thing that we need. So we fetch it, and in response, we obtain 1 mega size. Of course, I mean, products are a very important entity in an e-commerce project. And because it has like many variants and every variant contains many attributes and many prices, and every price is for every country and every currency, every customer group. So it has a lot of dimensions. So of course it's a big piece of information, but we only wanted one field. So the good thing is that GraphQL doesn't have this problem. Because in here, you can really only ask for name. And when you do that, you reduce it to 1K of data. And if we compare it, it's 1,000 times smaller in size. And which makes it, because of this less processing and less information via the network, it makes it 10 times faster. And this information is taken from a production project, so it's a real project. This is not the only advantage of GraphQL. It has many, and we are going to go through all of them. So one of the things that you have already seen is these function thingies that I was telling you about. So now imagine that we get the name, but the name has different translations. In REST API, we will just receive all of them. But we only want English, right? So it will be up to you to find a way to select the one that you want. And in languages, it may be not so big, but imagine now that you receive all the variants and you only wanted one, or all the prices and you only wanted one. So it can be much more problematic than just the translations. In GraphQL, as we have seen, you just select the locale that you want, and then you get exactly this translation without any more problems. But functions in GraphQL are not only about whitelisting. It does a lot of logic for you also. So, for example, we have this accept language option as well, in which you say the languages that you want to support. So first I want Spanish, then I want Italian, and then I want English. And GraphQL will take care of analyzing the languages and getting you the first one that matches your request. So it will go to Spanish, it will say, no, there's no Spanish, and then it will go to Italian, and they will see, oh yeah, there's Italian, and it will return you a BGM engine, which I hope I pronounced it correctly. So you see that you can really get potentially much more logic from just the functions. There's another way to also save lots of requests. So when you want, for example, to fetch the category name of one category and the total amount of products, in the REST API, you will have to do 2 requests for that because they are different endpoints, right? In GraphQL, you can put as many requests in as many queries in one request as you want, and you will receive the information in every one of the fields. This potentially can save you a lot of requests. You can also query to the same field, like getting the name of category 1 and getting the name of category 2. But if you try this, it's going to tell you this error. It's going to tell you that you're using the same field for different values. So when it returns, it will say like, okay, I have category, and this is the names, but I cannot tell you which one is category 1 and which one is category 2, because in GraphQL, the key should be unique. So it's suggesting you to use aliases. How can you use aliases? It's very easy. You just have to put here in front of the field the name that you want, and then in the response, you're going to receive, instead of category, there's going to be the name that you assigned. This way you solve the conflict and you can obtain the information that you wanted. Okay, I really like this example because that's something I have suffered in the past. Have you ever tried to make a navigation menu? In a navigation menu, you have to build kind of a category tree in which you have the first level categories, then each one of them has the second level categories, and then each one of these second level has another third level categories. So in the end, yeah, you're building a tree. If we try to do it with REST API, we can try by saying, okay, give me those categories that do not have a parent. Those would be the first level categories, the root categories. And then we can get information that we want. But we will see that we only have parent information and ancestors information. What about the children? We don't have access to the children. So if you want to build a category tree, you will have to use some of the SDKs that we provide or some libraries or your own code to extract this information. I mean, it is possible. It's just going to be a little bit of post-processing. How does it look in GraphQL? In GraphQL, we have the we can do the same approach. So we get only the categories that have no parent. We get the information that we want, and then we can call children with the name and a slug to get the second level categories. And we can also get more children of these ones to get the third level categories. And with this, you already have the category tree that before, with REST API, you had to do a lot of post-processing. And the reason is because in GraphQL, you are only fetching the information that you want. So we can allow us to provide more fields with data in a different shape. So for example, in this case, we can provide parents, ancestors, and children, and you're only going to fetch one of them. It looks very beautiful, right? But from a developer's eyes, probably your eyes are hurting because there's the application. And luckily, GraphQL has a way to avoid application. So this method is called fragments. Fragments, you say to which type you want to apply a fragment, to create a fragment, and then you say the elements you want to obtain from this type. When you want to use it, you just use the sprite operator, the name of the fragment that you want to call, and that's it. Everywhere you're calling it, it will be using the fields that you defined in the fragment. And I don't want to end all the characteristics of GraphQL before mention that we also have mutation. It's not only queries, we can also do mutations, which is anything that creates, updates, or deletes entities. And in this example, we are creating a card with a certain currency, and we are requesting to obtain from this new card the ID and the created art. And that's exactly what happens. We get the created card with its ID and with the created art. So it's also very simple. Now let's move into another topic, error handling. This is an important topic because it's going to be different from REST API. So it's worth explaining it. Okay, so GraphQL, as we saw, it's using HTTP. So you're going to receive HTTP status code the same. And in the case of 500s, it's going to be the same as in the REST API. It means that something really bad happened. And luckily with commercetools, this won't happen. So we can go to the next error. 400s. This means that your query violated the GraphQL schema. And only that. So there's no bad request in the more senses. It's just a schema violation. And we can see this example. In this example, we are requesting products with an ID that it's a number when it should be a string, and with a field that doesn't exist. So it's going to, when we execute it, it's going to return us a 400. It's going to tell us that data is null because it couldn't process it. And then it's going to have an errors object that will contain several error messages, one saying that the string was expected a string, but it was a number, and another one saying that the wrong field doesn't exist. So this is the way you're going to receive this information. Then there's also the 401. This is exactly the same also as the REST API. It means unauthorized, you didn't provide a valid authentication token. So this one is exactly the same. And now for the most interesting one, the 200. So unlike what you would think, 200 doesn't mean that everything went wonderful. No, not in GraphQL. So in GraphQL, it means that it was possible to execute it. I mean, there were no problems with the query and everything. That doesn't mean that the execution was as you would have expected. So you may receive data and or errors in your response. Let's see with this example. So we are having this mutation. The mutation is trying to do two things. On one side, it's creating a card with this currency, looks good, this is going to work. Now it's also trying to create a zone. And this zone is using a duplicated key. This is going to fail. And when we execute it, we receive the 200. We receive things on data. In particular, we received the card that we created because that was fine. It was created fine. But the create zone failed, and you can see it because it's null. And in the error messages, it's going to tell you, yeah, the applicated value exists, so we couldn't create it, and that's it. So you see that even you receive 200, that doesn't mean that everything went as you expected. And that is important if you're using the HTTP status code for monitoring or logging. You have to adapt to the new structure, to the new way of working, okay? Another thing that changes is caching. Because especially on the network side, if we think about network caching and how it works with REST, it is very straightforward, because when you look at a URL at a request in REST, you're going to see that the URL itself already tells you a lot of what is going to happen. So we see this and we know that it's going to fetch a product. We see this and we know that it's going to update an order. This is going to create a customer, and this is going to delete a cart. So caching can already know when to cache things and what to cache and all that stuff. When we see this in GraphQL, it can be anything, and yet it's all under the same URL. So the same approach as works in REST won't work. Does that mean that there's no possibility to do network caching? No, there is possibilities. There's some articles about Apollo having some solutions for it. And the solution goes by identifying uniquely every one of your queries, and so that then in the URL it appears this unique identifier and it can be easily cached. But it's not as straightforward as in REST, and it's quite more complicated, yeah. But opposed to network caching, we also have application caching, and this is very important with GraphQL if you really want to use the whole benefits of it. And that's why many of the GraphQL clients are using caching, are offering it. And the ones that are not offering it is on purpose, because they want to be lightweight and they don't want to get into so much detail when you don't need it. So the only thing to take into account into application caching is that you have to provide some unique identifier, global ID, so that the caching can successfully cache the information. For example, this card will contain the type, which is card, and the ID that belongs to it. And this way, the caching system will work fine. Now, how do you get this type part? Well, I didn't explain it yet, but with GraphQL, besides all the information, you can also get metadata. So with the metadata, you can, for example, request information about the type name, and in the request, you will receive that it's a card, what you got here. So you get the type name, you get the ID, and you already have this combination. At least in a Apollo client, which we are going to take a look later, in Apollo client, it already by default fetches the type name. So you don't necessarily have to explicitly request it in every query. It's already queried everywhere. So the only thing that you have to query is the ID. Now into the tools. What tools can we use to connect to our GraphQL API? So GraphQL clients would be one of the first things that you're going to use, because this is what you need to connect to the API. And of course, I mean, in JavaScript is where you will find the most variety of GraphQL clients that there is. And I'm just going to mention two, but there's really a lot. So please take a look and find the one that that matches your needs best. The first one is GraphQL Request by Prisma. This one is very lightweight. It's just a fetch wrapped into some code that will allow you to easily make requests and get the responses. So it could be used for prototypes and for server-to-server communication. Apollo client is the other one. This is the one we are using. It is very powerful. It contains caching and many other features. And you can also use it. It has versions for all the major front-end frameworks in JavaScript. So take a look at it, because this is a really nice one. If you also need to do a native application, Apollo also provides some clients for that. There's the Apollo Android in Java and the Apollo iOS in Swift. And of course, any other language, .NET, Python, just take a look. There you will probably find a client for that. Now to GraphQL servers. You may want to do a GraphQL server if you want to have an API gateway in front of our API, GraphQL API. In the case that, for example, you want to merge several services, kind of commercetools with a CMS or any other service, and you want to have just one single GraphQL API that your client is using. So there are many techniques to merge different services into one GraphQL query API. So for example, schema stitching and things like that. So take a look at it and find your best approach. But in the case of the supported languages, you don't have to worry because GraphQL is supporting in most of the major programming languages that you can find. So I'm sure you will find yours. You may also want to mock a server, and for that, well, you know, in case you want to test your client or start implementing your API gateway before, well, at the same time that you are implementing the frontend. There may be many situations, but if you're interested in it, take a look at Apollo GraphQL tools. It has, yeah, it supports mocking in many different ways, so it could be very useful. And also code generation, especially if you're using a type language, please take a look at it because it's way easier if you are using classes that adjust to the schema, because this is what code generation does. It gets the schema, it generates some classes and types for your language of choice. This way you can have the code type safe and access all the information very easily. And there's already some languages available for that. And in any case, GraphQL code generation, this is a project that is working with plugins. So you can implement your own plugin if there's no support yet for your language, and then generate the code from it. And last but very important, we have GraphQL. GraphQL is an in-browser IDE for GraphQL. And we have one in commercetools. If you access Impex and then you select your project and go to GraphQL IDE, you will find here the GraphQL. And it's very interesting because on one side, it will give you support to to completion, so you can select the one that you want. It will also give you some documentation about the arguments that you want to use, and it will also tell you about syntactic error, and yeah, it really gives you a lot of feedback about what you're doing, because it's always reading the GraphQL schema and then it's validating your query against it. Also, you have, I don't know, some predify options, and even you have profiling, which is really cool because then you can see how much every field costs, so that you can optimize your query based on these metrics. And last but very cool is the Documentation Explorer. This is my favorite because in here you can start exploring all the possibilities. So we have all these queries, and for example, we'll go to categories, and we have all these arguments that we can use, and we get this result, which is an array of categories. And in categories, we have name and locale, accepted languages, as we have seen. So it really allows you to explore, and in general, GraphQL is a really good tool to start working with GraphQL. Even when you want to build your query, here it's the best place where you can start building it. So we have, as I have mentioned, this front-end implementation that it's only using GraphQL. It is Sunrise, and in particular, it's it's a single-page application that is using Vue framework and Apollo client to connect to the GraphQL query. There's no middleware at all. It's just one single application here. And in here, it's very simple, the code, and yet it's very powerful because it does everything that it's supposed to do. And in here, you can find many best practices, and any doubts that you have, you can take a look how it was solved here. So yeah, go to this repo and take a look because you will find many interesting things there. And now let's go for the demo. So for the demo, I'm going to create a Vue project from the start, install Apollo, and then connect and do some queries. So let's get going. To create, I mean, I'm using just the Vue CLI and with default. So now it's just creating all the projects. And so once this is done, we are going to install also Apollo, just the client. And after that, we are going to also install one SDK, well, one utility that we have in our Node.js SDK, but it's just one utility besides, so you don't have to install the whole SDK, and you will see it now. So now we are installing Apollo, and it's going to ask us if we want a example code. We don't want a GraphQL server. We don't want it either. And with this, we will be done in this part. Great. Okay, so now we're going to open it. Let me open it properly. It's here. Okay. So here we have the connector. This is the creation of the Apollo client. It is a pretty long long file, and not really. I prefer to put this. That's why I put the snippet here. In this snippet, I have we installed the plugin. We use this connector that I was telling you. This it's a token provider. The only thing that it takes care of is creating the token, is refreshing it, and providing it when I ask for it, and that's it. It's very, very light. And then here we create the provider for the Apollo client that Vue is going to use. So the only thing we are missing is to add this dependency for commercetools, the authentication thingy. And once it's done, we can already run the server and see how it looks like. Okay, let's serve. And now we can go here, and hopefully it will be very soon running. Taking a little bit longer because the computer has too many things to do. Yeah, we understand. So I'm confident this will work. Yes, so this is the typical initial page for Vue. Okay, so let's remove all that we don't care about. Okay, let's leave at least some CSS so that it looks nice. Okay, so let's start by putting Apollo. And now we have to write here the field that we want to access. And what we want to do is get the total amount of products. And we want it to be a query. And now we are going to use the GraphQL tag. This is, and we have to import it. This is so that we can put the query here, and it will compile it into GraphQL. So something that it understands. Okay, so here we put the GraphQL query. We say products, and then total. This is what we wanted. So I'm just going to put here that total products, it's products total, because it's products total. And let me just put here if, I just put here so that if it's still not loaded, the products, it won't try to execute it, because otherwise it might break the application. Okay, look at that, we are already connected. So we are showing already that we have all these products. Now let's show a little bit more. We can access the results. And I know this by heart, but usually otherwise I will go to the graphical and build the query there. So we go to current and get, now we want to get the name, and the name we want it in English. So we just have to go here, put a div, a before for every product we have in products results, because it's products results. Now we want to print product, master data and current name. So this one should be working. Yes, here we have the first 20 products. Let's reduce it a little bit though. Let's put that it's only 10. And that's it. I mean, it was very easy. I don't know how long it took us, but it's really fast to start writing this GraphQL. So now that I've shown you this, allow me to close this and open this other one instead. It's the same as before. This is the one that is in the repository. Just it's a little bit, I mean, this is the same component we were writing before with the names and the total amount of products. And there's some other ones. So we have cart, in which we are showing the line items, quantity, name, total price. And we also have a button to add something to the cart, product to the cart. You see here is the mutation to add the product to the cart. And this is to create in case it's still not created the cart. And here we have also a button to create an order out from the cart. So let's make it run. So this is only to show you how the caching works, because it's really, really important in Apollo how it works. And it's very powerful, as I said. So I guess we can already refresh. Yes, this is the other application. It's a little bit nicer, but it's exactly the same as before. So when we add something, we can see here that the cart is being filled. And if we look at the network, we can see that the only thing there is just one single request for updating the cart, where we are receiving in the response all the updated information about this cart with the new line items and the new price and everything. So there's only one. So how is this getting the information? For that, we have to go to Apollo and to the Apollo cache. You can see here that it's cached all the entities that we are displaying at the moment, all the products, the line items, and the cart. So, and you can see also it's using this unique ID that I was showing you before with the type name and the ID. So whenever we're adding something, you can see that it's immediately here. The total price is increasing, the version, and the line items. If we add one more, then it's just updating everything. And here it's the same. So every component that is using this same cart is going to be observing this, and it's going to use this as a main reference. So that's the magic of it. There's no extra request. It's just one thing updating and everybody else getting up to date with the new information. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you about the caching. Some final thoughts about GraphQL. So I hope I made the point that your application can really benefit from GraphQL to reduce overfetching, to reduce post-processing. So if you're suffering from it, GraphQL could be a very good choice. Also, of course, if your application is depending on connectivity, on battery usage, because it's in a smartphone, a tablet, or any other mobile device, it's also very important for it to be able to not suffer from these pains. Also, you have to take into account that GraphQL has a learning curve because, I mean, compared to the RESTful approach that we are always using, because it has some different error handling and caching. So things may change. It doesn't mean that it's going to be worse or better. It's just you have to adapt to it. And another thing is that it may fit more naturally with some languages. And what I mean is that for JavaScript, it's super natural to use GraphQL because of the objects and many more things. For Java, for example, as a strong type language, it may not feel so naturally, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be bad, because we have all this code generation that it's awesome, and they're doing a great job, all the community, to bring all these tools for type languages as well. So it's just going to be a little bit more boilerplate, but that's it. And if you still want to know more about GraphQL, our CPO at commercetools, Kelly Getch, it's going to be publishing soon, this booklet, GraphQL for Modern Commerce. And it's going to be in fall 19, but you can already pre-register to get a copy the moment it's published. So here you will find many more answers to your questions. But meanwhile, I hope we can also answer them, you here.
Yeah. Laura, thank you so much for the great presentation and the demo. We already received a lot of questions from the audience, and I'd like to go through some of them. So the first question is there a way to make an OR query rather than using the aliases, the example with the 2 categories query?
So you want to say, but you want to say then that you want one category or the other, depending on certain information? I mean, there's no possibility to do an OR. It's just you say this category and the other. I mean, yeah, it's you're not going to receive much information as to be worried about that.
Oh, we got the information. He means more and than or.
More and than or. Yeah. I mean, it is an end. I mean, I don't really get the question. So maybe you can continue writing and explaining better, and then we go back to that question.
And wait for your question. So the next question is, you showed the fragment to reduce duplication, but it's still quite static. Is there a way to get a whole tree with a dynamic depth of children?
No, I mean, this is also something that I didn't want to go in deep into that, but actually it's really great that you brought it up. There's a cost behind it. So imagine doing one call like that, that it's recursive, you know, it could be very, very painful for the backend. So when you send the request, the backend is going to be calculating the cost behind it, depending on the limit that you use and the number of nested that you're going to use. And it may reject it if it's going past that. Okay, okay, I know that doesn't answer your question directly, but I also wanted to bring it up. Your question directly, is it possible to do it like that? No, you cannot do it more dynamic than that. And so you can, I mean, you're not going to have more than 3 levels, so it also doesn't necessarily need to optimize so much. Yeah, you just can provide all the information inside the fragment and then have the 3 levels. But I don't think you will be able to do many more nested levels, because that will be very costly and probably it will be rejected.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So let's get back to the first question. He wrote, instead of 2 queries, is one request to only have 1 query category?
Okay, yeah, I know what you mean. So instead of using 2 fields, having a field in that. Well, you can use categories. So instead of category in singular, you can use the field categories and then say that you want only those categories that have key 1 and key 2, or G1 and G2. and then you will receive a result of 2 elements because it will maximum fit 2 elements, and you will get that. So that would be a way to use in just one query with the categories field. I hope that answered your question. And if not, let me know.
Thank you so much. Next question is, in the error handling slide, when there was an error in the 200 case, is there a way to make the request transactional? If creating zone results an error, not to create the card means rollback?
No. As far as I know, and I mean, I didn't investigate, but I'm pretty sure I would have heard already. No, you cannot say like only execute, create the card if everything works. So what you can do in any case is you create the card, so you create the zone first, and then if it works, then you create the card. That's the only solution I can think of. But there's no way to say it like that.
Okay, so the next is error response structure is already defined in GraphQL or commercetools team customized it?
The error structure is from the GraphQL specification. So it is exactly as I explained it. Actually, I mean, that's the great thing about GraphQL. The same way that in REST API, we had to figure out how to solve some problems, like, for example, reference expansions and update actions. In GraphQL, it's all in the specification. I mean, what doesn't cover the specification might be the network that you have to use or the serialization for the responses, but about the query, it is very well explained.
Yeah. Thank you. So commercetools GraphQL API does not cover all commercetools REST API features. For example, product projection search, facilitating or query custom objects. When will all features be supported by the commercetools GraphQL API?
Well, you see that we are already working at a higher speed in that sense. We are still, of course, working on our REST API. Yeah, we don't have a particular date. I'm also not in the product side, so I cannot really say that part. So let's leave it as that the answer. Cannot talk much.
Thank you so much. Next question is, can Sunrise Spa project be considered as an accelerator to implement a project?
No, I mean, Sunrise SPA at the moment, it's mostly for building prototypes. That was the objective. So if somebody here knows about the previous Sunrise, the Java one, that was meant for that. But in this case, we really wanted to focus on just building a demo, a prototype that can be easily extended for when you have to do prototypes and things like that. So no, it's not meant for that. It's mostly to be used as a reference to solve some common problems that we have. I mean, it's the first place that we are really building an e-commerce shop with GraphQL. So this is the main objective, and of course you are free to use it as you want. But also, I mean, the thing about it's a single page application, therefore it has to use a specific kind of the view, the single page application template client credentials, because the credentials are in the browser, but they are limited. So I mean, there might be some security issues that you may not want to have in your production project. But yeah, again, you can take it as an example and use it as you want.
Thank you, Laura. The next question is if there is anywhere an Angular 2 example we can clone.
You mean like in Sunrise SPA? Because that's or the example here. I only have examples in Vue. Unfortunately, we don't have in Angular or React at the moment. But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of documentation out there. The Vue, not the Vue Apollo, but you know this file, the Vue Apollo, which is in the end the most one that you have to customize. It will be very similar, just a different way of creating the Apollo client. But the rest, yeah, should be quite documented everywhere.
Okay, Laura, thank you so much. We are really overwhelmed by your feedback and we received so many questions, but unfortunately we don't have the time to answer all of them. So please feel free to ask your questions while answering to the following up mail of the webinar. It will be sent out within the following days, and so please feel free, answer the email, ask your questions, and we'll get back to you. So thank you so much for your attention. Laura, thank you really, really much.
Welcome. Thank you for everybody for attending. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, same here. So have a great day and yeah, hope to see you the next time. Bye-bye.